To get started with, I'm just going to show you exactly how you get to the site. It is voterlistsonline.com. And so what you're presented with is this login page. Some of you may be familiar with this. Some of you may already have accounts. I'm going to go ahead and give a quick overview of signing up for voterlistsonline.com. Anybody can use this service as long as they meet the legal requirements to access that voter data. So to get started, all you need to do is browse to this web page, go ahead and click Open New Account, and fill out this registration form. Required fields are indicated by a red asterisk. And there's a couple of notes that I'm going to point out to you. The first is that the organization name and website URL are really important to us being able to open your account. Every one of these accounts is scrutinized in person to make sure that they're meeting the legal requirements to access voter data in the requested states. So be sure you fill out that organization name, the URL if you have one. Fill this information out as detailed as you can. P.O. boxes are not acceptable in the address line. You can use the P.O. box in the address line too if you'd like to include that, but we do need a street address in order to grant access. And then finally, go ahead and make sure that you only request access to the states that you need. There's different vetting policies for each state, so you may qualify in one state and not in another. And finally, also, the intended use, be as detailed as possible. There are some examples below, but it's important that we know the organization name because we vet on organization as well. Once you finish filling out this form, you submit it, you'll be notified that you'll receive an email with further information. We may request clarification on a certain point, or else you'll receive an email notifying you that your account has been opened. Once your account is opened, you can return to voterlistsonline.com and use the login box to enter the site. And so this is the landing page which you'll log into each time you enter Voter Lists Online. As you can see to the right, there's some scrolling information about recent acquisitions as well as some basic info for different states or changes to the site. There's also an unread notifications area below for any notifications that are sent to you in particular from us. The site's general layout is pretty straightforward. There are these 3 quick start icons on the landing page, but everywhere on the site you'll always have this navigation bar at the top left corner. The tabs are descending, so the top tabs affect what areas you're shown below. For example, if I were to jump to My Files, I would have just the Downloaded Files tab to view below that, whereas on the home page, I've got some different areas I can jump to. To get started today, we're going to go ahead and jump into looking at the Query Builder. So I'm going to use this shortcut on the dashboard. You can also go to the Queries tab at the top. Now, this is the main area for building queries in Voter Lists Online. You can see in the center of the page, or the left-hand side of the page, there are query clauses you can use to build your individual query. We're going to go ahead and get started on the right-hand side. The first and most important step to getting started is always to select the state that you want to be querying in. For today, we're going to use Ohio just as an example. Notice that there's a checkbox reading Clear Query on Switch. If this is checked, any information you have in the query clauses will be removed when you switch states. So if you start building your query in one state and realize you want to run it in another, you're going to want to uncheck that box when you switch. Next to the state selector is a summary button. If you click on this, you can see some basic information about that state and the data we have for it. We'll give that just a second. And so on the left-hand side, you can see by county when the data was most recently acquired. That's shown in this column in the center. And then the COA column stands for change of address, and that's the most recent change of address application that's been applied to this data. The information is also updated with the no-call lists, and individuals who have become deceased from Social Security data, we're able to apply that every 30 days. There's some other basic information about each state that's shown in this right-hand column of this box. The first line is universally there to tell you where the data is obtained from. So in the case of Ohio, it's directly from the Secretary of State's office. There's some basic information about what data we have. In particular, note for each state whether or not voters register by party and information about the primaries. That will help you determine whether you'll be able to narrow down to a particular party in your count. There are some data points to tell you our total numbers for this state, and then there's some legal information for each state below that. Also, we do keep a detailed voter history. You can always obtain this from the summary page for each state. If you click on that, you'll see this gives you the option to download a spreadsheet of votes by county and election. So we can take a look at that. So here are the counties on the left-hand side, and across the top you can see the elections that you're looking at. And these are counts of voters at the time of the election. So if we close the summary box, you can see in the query overview area below the state selection are query statistics. And we'll talk about what these are in particular a little more once we've built the beginning of a count. But note there are checkboxes, and you can check as many of these as you like. At the bottom is the raw query page. This shows you the query that you're running so far in the selected state. Don't note that by default exclude deceased and exclude movers are always going to be selected into this box, and you can actually change those if you, for some reason, want to include those individuals. You can also toggle the raw query between SQL and English. Most users will find English the easier to read, but if you're interested in the exact query or for whatever reason do want to see that in SQL, you can toggle between that. And you can also copy this information to the clipboard. In case you wanted to contact support, for example, about a particular query, this is an easy way to send us what you're running. We're going to take a look at the query builder in just a second, but let's go ahead and look at some of the other tabs here. In particular, the query manager. Once you've built a query, you can save that query by entering a name at the top of the query builder and choosing Save as New Query. You'll receive this notification that the query was saved successfully, and you can access these from the query manager on the tabs above. As you can see, you can delete queries from this page. You can also view the query by clicking the icon of the folder with binoculars. That brings the query details into the query box on the right-hand side, and you can see those details there. You can load a saved query by using the icon of a cog with the green arrow, and that loads it directly into your query builder, which can be accessed from the top tab. And you can also filter this list, just for your information. It defaults to the last 7 days, so if you save a list and come back and don't see it, most likely you're going to want to change your filter to include a larger time period. Returning to the query builder, you can see the clauses are generally descending from least specific to most specific. So the queries built in Voter Lists Online are run by reducing from a set pool. So you begin with every voter in the state selected, and as you add additional clauses, you remove from that group until you have just the individuals you're looking for. From each of the query clause areas, you can choose the item to the right, add jurisdiction, or sorry, add a particular query, to open a detailed window. And there are a couple of different general types of windows we'll be looking at today. This is a static window, meaning the options here are set for any given state. So we can choose a particular item from this list, or by holding down Control on our keyboard, we can choose multiple items and add those to our query. For the most part, all the queries in VLO are divided out into a right pane and a left pane. The left pane generally has a window to give you information about the particular area you're looking at, and then panes to show you other areas under this major heading. So in jurisdiction, you can search by congressional district, state senate district, state lower house, county, precinct, residence city zip, and mail city zip. And the differences between these fields can be noted from the information box on the left. Now, the first 4 options on this page, the districts, the house division, and the county, are all static fields. They have a set list that you can choose from. The rest of these items are dynamic, meaning you build them out of the current selection of data that you have. Currently, we have every voter in Ohio selected, so if we click Load Reload Precinct, it's going to be a fairly large area. I'm going to go ahead and divide it down to a single congressional district by selecting that and pressing OK. Now, when I return to one of these other fields, if I build a list, it'll contain only individuals who are in that congressional district. Note that you can choose the minimum number of times that an item needs to occur before it appears on this list. And this can help in certain areas to remove superfluous data. For example, if a voter moves and their mail address is still the old address, they'll have an address that's outside your zip range. In a single instance of that, you don't want the zip code to come up. It may not even be in the same state. So if we click Load, Reload Precinct Ward, Voter Lists Online will generate a list of the available precincts out of the current selection of voters. And that information is displayed in the pane below. Note that there are two scroll bars here. You can scroll the major window. You can also scroll the sub-pane below. And these lists are sortable. So if we wanted to arrange items by the county name, we can click on the county title to change between ascending and descending order. And that's true for all of the column headings. We can choose by ward, precinct number, precinct name, or the count, which is the number of voters contained in this current field. You can select as many items from these dynamic lists as you like by using the checkboxes at the left-hand side. And there's quite a few, so we're going to go ahead and leave it at just a couple. And you can add this to your query by clicking OK. So far, we've looked at the jurisdiction area. You can see our clause is currently shown here. We've got the data point is in precinct, that it's set to equal, and the areas that we selected from our list. You can view this query by clicking onto the folder with the magnifying glass, binoculars, and you can actually edit it by choosing that and then changing your selection. You can also delete any of the query clauses that you have selected by using the red X next to each clause. So for example, I can remove those precinct designations using that red X at this time. Now that we have the beginning of a query, I'm going to go ahead and go back to the right-hand pane and talk about the query statistics. Once you've begun to build a query, you can click Recalculate to get a current count of the number of voters selected. And those counts appear to the right of each of these statistics on the side. Now, the different checkboxes can be used all at the same time, so we can get counts for 3 of these if we like. And the distinction is that unique voters pulls up every individual who has a unique registration in our current selection. So this time that's Representative Steve Chaboth's district. You can also choose by unique phone numbers. This eliminates any 2 voters that have the same phone number in our database, and it usually keeps the oldest voter based on the date of birth found on the registration. You can choose by unique household, which uses a number of criteria including last name and the registration address to determine household information. You can choose unique addresses that would eliminate any 2 individuals that list the same address. And you can choose unique household phone, which uses a combination of the sorting of unique households and unique phones. So this is generally the lowest count if you run that. As you can see, you get a number of different counts based on the criteria you select, and this would be determined by the way you want to use this data. If you wanted to reach out by phone to groups of people, you probably wouldn't want 2 of the same phone number on your list. So you can choose to sort by unique phone numbers, and that gives you the most accurate and useful data. I'm going to go ahead and leave unique voters and unique phones checked and return to the query builder to go over some of the other areas. The demographics item allows you to choose various different demographic areas to sort by. You can use a date of birth or an age range. As you can see from the left-hand side, the age indicator is taken from a third-party source, and it can sometimes conflict with the birth date that the individual used as the registration date. Below that, you can see we can choose to sort by gender, and as with many fields where there are box selections like this, you can hold down Control on your keyboard to select multiple items. Leaving all in the selection would prevent that from being useful, but if you just wanted to avoid selecting individuals who have blank gender information, you could select male and female here, for example. Note that deceased and moved are automatically excluded by default, but you can uncheck those fields to include them in the search. There's also various ethnicity information and minority information you can use to target voters. And there's descriptions on the left-hand side about where this data is obtained. For example, the census ethnicity data uses search by census block. So you can search for a particular ethnic group and select all of the individuals in a block that has over a certain percentage of that ethnicity. For example, if we chose Hawaiian and left the selector at 50%, we would get every individual who falls into a census block that is over 50% Hawaiian on the most recent census info. Finally, you can choose to select by the number of trailing voters in the household of the individual. The next query clause is party information. Ohio does have this information, however some states do not register by party. So you may open this page to see a note saying you'll have to use primary elections to identify these individuals. When this is available, you can simply select the item and click OK to add to the query. You can choose unaffiliated, for example, and add that to our search. Voter history is a new kind of query builder, different from the ones we've gone over so far. In voter history, you can choose the elections that you want to include in your search and the data that you want to be found in that election. So for example, we can use everybody who voted in the primary 10 election and the general 10 election, but did not vote in the 2008 presidential election. Once you selected the elections and the data points that you're looking for, you can choose the way in which you want to correlate these. Voting frequency determines the way voting frequency count is applied. So for example, if we choose all, the frequency count is ignored, and every individual would have to meet every one of our selections in the election years in order to be included in our search results. If we choose at least and set our voting frequency to 2, the individuals would have to have voted the way we selected above in at least 2 of our 3 selections. If we choose exactly, the individuals would need to have voted in exactly as we selected in 2 of these, but not exactly as we selected in the 3rd. And finally, if we choose at most, the individual would need to have voted in at least 2 of these, but not a 3rd election of any data. There's another new area in the voting history area selector, and that's the complex query builder. Whereas normal queries are run in single clauses and applied to the main data, voting history and some of the other fields in voter lists online can be used to build complex queries. The way this is done is that you build a full query on the right-hand side and use the green additional symbol to bring it into the complex query builder. You can then build a second query clause and bring that in as well. By selecting both clauses and using either union or intersection, you can combine those into a new clause. So in this case, because I can't select both absentee and voted at the same time in the main query builder, I've built one selection of the same elections using voted and one selection using voted absentee. And I'm using a union to bring all of those together. So I'm now selecting any individuals who met my search criteria either as a voter or an absentee voter. And the new clause is available under the main query, the complex query builder. You can put a checkbox next to it and click Add to Query to send that to the main page. Note that there are 2 other panes to search for under voter history. There's the registration date pane where you can enter a range of dates in the specified format, and restrict your search to only voters who have registered within that date range. You can also choose by voter status. This voter status is applied by the state, and different states use different criteria to apply voter status, but you can choose to include active or inactive voters or all voters in your search. Once we click OK, you can see that my voting history query is included in the main clause. If I were to scroll up and click Recalculate, I could get new numbers to the right-hand side on Query Overview. The next field is the mail selection. You can use this to restrict your query down to more probable addresses. So if we click Add Mail, You can see this brings up two panes regarding mailing addresses. We can choose to use only certified mailing addresses by using this checkbox. We can also restrict to certain types of zip codes, and this is one search where the control key becomes very useful. If you wanted to select all areas except for PO boxes, you can hold down Control and select all 5 of the other options. When I click OK, you can see my mailing information is now restricted to any of these 5 options, but not PO boxes. The phone area is much the same. You can use this to select certainty on your phone records. You can choose to include only records that contain phone numbers. You can also choose the phone match quality. In many cases, the phone numbers are appended as third-party information, and there are different certainty values for those matches. 1 is the most likely match. If it's a 1, there's the highest certainty that that phone number matches the individual it's on. 7 is the least certain out of matches where phone numbers were found, and no match available selects records that we're unable to find a phone number for. There's the option to suppress mobile phones in the next pane, and this is the first time we're going to view a premium field. Throughout voter lists online, premium fields are notated with this green dollar symbol to the left of them. The use of any premium field in your query will slightly change the pricing information on your search. The number of premium fields you use overall will not affect it, so it's either all or nothing. We'll take a look at pricing information in just a moment. You can choose to exclude voters who are on the FTC's Do Not Call registry, and you can also build out an area of area codes. This breakout is the same as the one that we did for precinct. It's dynamic and it pulls from our current selection. So if we choose, for example, 100 times as our breakout and click Load, Reload, we'll be able to see a list of area codes for our current selection. And so because I restricted to 100 times, it's a fairly small number of results. If I were to reduce that to a lower number, we would see more of our registered voters show up in this pane. Moving down, below the phone area is the micro-targeting selection. By using micro-targeting, you can search by a number of different criteria, such as third-party appended magazine subscriptions. As you can see, there are a number of panes on the left-hand side for this area, and several of those are premium fields, which is worth noting. So there's income and wealth information, a marital status selection, choice to select by presence of children, education level selection, business owner queries, contributors to different organizations, contributors on the FEC's list. And please do note that there are restrictions particular to this data. Selection by the children's age range, and this also allows you to select by child gender. Homeowner information, home value information, various magazine purchases, and various merchandise purchases. And these fields are all appended as part of a third-party data appendix. So, moving on, the next search is the geospatial search. Because the search can be fairly complex, I've chosen to load it in advance in another browser. Geospatial allows you to use an actual map to select a region of geography to search within. As you can see, I've chosen the location of Complete Campaign's office. Geospatial Builder is fairly straightforward. On the left-hand side are 3 different selection tools. By selecting one of these tools and left-clicking into the map, you can begin drawing a bounding area. By right-clicking, you can make joints in the bounding area, and finally, by left-clicking again, you can release the bounding tool and create the final selection. Because of the complexity of this search, in some cases, geospatial searches can take up to 5 minutes to run. Returning to the main query area, the next selection is custom searching. If you're unable to find something in the previous search areas, and we do have that data, custom searching is the place to go to. There are two different ways to build queries here. The first is the simple data input search, where you can choose the item you want to look in, and then you can enter information below. One particularly useful way to select in this area is to use zip information. If you have a list of items that you want to do a search by, and it's a lot to put in through the actual interface, you can actually cut and paste a list into this selection. So for example, a selection of comma-separated zip codes could be used all at once to pull up that entire list of information. Note that at the top right corner of this box, there's a definition button. This allows you to download a spreadsheet, which has detailed definition information about most of the searchable fields. And you can see the possible values in these fields and also the possible fields to search by from this sheet. That's one half of the custom search builder. The other half is the breakout method. And this is just like the dynamic searches that we built earlier, only we can choose to run this by almost any field in VLO. The first step is to select from the list at the top the field you're looking at. We could choose, for example, school district. We can place a checkbox next to it and click Generate Breakout. If that information is provided on this list, you'll be able to see a full selection of the counts for that particular area. Like all the breakouts in Voter Lists Online, this uses only the data in the current selections, so only our 282,000 currently selected voters will be included. Finally, from the query builder, if you've purchased lists in the past, you can choose to deduplicate those lists against your current selection. One particular way this is useful is if you do a targeted search for a particular geographical entity and later decide that you want to do a search for a larger area around that same item. To prevent purchasing the same records twice, you can use the Add Dedupe option. And this would bring up a list of the lists that you've already purchased from Voter Lists Online, and you can choose to remove all of the entities from one list from your current selection. Once you have a selection, you can use the pivot table to examine it in a little bit more detail. The pivot table is available under Queries in the subtab Pivot. The pivot table lets you correlate any two data entities from a list of items against one another. So we'll build an example to make that a little more clear. We currently have individual selected, but we can choose the same search entities that we used on the last page. To use the pivot table, we first choose our column item, and then choose our row item. So for example, for this query, I'm going to correlate the mail address zip code to education level. And then I'm going to set my minimum number of occurrences to 10. After selecting information in these two areas, I can click the Run button. To build a breakout of that information. As you can see, the education levels, which are coded, and those codes are available on that definition page, run across the top columns. The rows include different zip codes in my current selection, and I can see in the center counts for each of those areas. So for example, in the zip code 45033, the code no information available for education level is 104 individuals. You can download the pivot table information into an Excel sheet by choosing this icon. This makes it easy to make a presentation of particular data that you've purchased by showing detailed information about the sub-selections. You can also view a graph of this information by clicking on the arrow. And this would allow you to see a visual representation of those different fields. And note that these are dynamic, so you can actually get counter information by mousing over it. Once you've built your list and determined that it's the correct selection, you can move on to purchasing. I recommend always saving your list after building it, just in case you want to go back and make a change. Saving it lets you load it directly into the query builder. So after I've saved, I can rerun our calculation and get a final count since I've made some changes. And then I can proceed to the checkout area. Now, one thing worthy of note is the fact that I have unique voters and unique phones selected. Once I proceed to check out, those are the options that I'll have in my sample purchase. So if I actually wanted unique household phones, I'd need to select that on the main page. You can see the first checkout screen is a basic summary of what you searched for. You can see both the SQL and the English version of your query on the left-hand side. And then you can choose to give a name and a description to your list. You need to give your list a name, but the description is optional. Once you've filled out this information and reviewed your query, you can use the Next button to move on to the next page. So, note, because I had individual and phone selected on the last page, those are the options that I have on this page for my checkout. I'm going to choose unique phones. Hypothetically, I'd be making phone calls to these individuals. And after that, I can choose the Next button to proceed. There are different kinds of samples that you can use out of your selection. And we'll actually take a look at the FAQ at the end of this webinar, just to go over what a few of those are. The easiest of these to use is random sample. If you have a total number of records that you're interested in and it is less than the number of records you have selected, you can simply select this and enter the number here. After you've chosen your sample type, you can choose Next. This gives you one last chance to review the information on the left-hand side. This now includes our list name, the description, the query total, and our sample type. And then we can choose Finish to process that list. Note that when you process a list, it does take just a few moments to show up in the My Files tab. You will be notified if you're logged into the site of when your list is finished, and you can view it from the My Files page. So, as you can see, our list is available here. Now, it's not ready for purchase because it hasn't yet finished processing. So it has a status as submitted and an estimated purchase price. While that's loading, we're going to go ahead and mouse over to the Frequently Asked Questions area and take a look at some pricing information. Frequently Asked Questions is available from the bottom of many sections of the site in this bar. In the Frequently Asked Questions area, you can see a brief overview of the pricing. The pricing is fairly straightforward for normal samples. It's 3 cents per record if no premium fields are used, and 6 cents per record if premium fields are used. There's a minimum charge of $30, which is what a standard selection will come out to at 1,000 records. Running counts in the site is, of course, completely free, and there's some basic information about payment methods and sample types here. If you are interested in running polling samples, you'll need to get in touch with a sales rep. And you can do that by emailing nationaldata@aristotle.com. And that information we can give to you from our contact page as well. And that holds true for prepaid blocks. We do contracts on VLO, which are by a period of time rather than by number of records. Returning to the main page, we can jump back to the dashboard. Which doesn't actually have our data just yet. Note that you can view the Notifications Center, where different information about lists you've purchased or selected will be shown. And there we go. Our file is ready to be purchased, so we can go to the My Files tab from this dropdown. In the My Files tab, we have a number of different options. We can review our purchased files. We can purchase them by using the Purchase Job icon of a green dollar symbol. We can view that query information by clicking on the magnifying glass. Here we can view information about which user purchased this file, the dates, and we can see once again the query information that was used. In the job bank, you can also choose your output fields. These are selected from the right-hand side. You can choose your template. There's a default template with 255 export options included, and we'll take a little bit more of a look at that in just a second. You can also choose the format that you wish to export to. There is CSV, which opens in Excel. There's DBF format, which is a database file. Tab delimited, which certain call houses may request. You can also choose walk sheet or walk lists, phone sheets, and labels for different campaign activities. And you can download the same list multiple times. So if you've reviewed a list and you're ready to send out a mailing to it, you can actually just jump here and print labels directly using that file. You can order your output by different preset criteria. This, as you can see, applies only to the CSV, DBF, and tab output. This criteria includes different information, such as a order that's designed to help with walk lists, where even in odd numbers of street addresses might be separated for left and right sides of the street. You can also edit the number of fields that are available. The number of fields differs by state. There are some that are consistent across all states. There is a maximum number of fields in any given export of 255. But once again, you can download the same data multiple times to see more than that number of fields. And as you can see, in the state of Ohio, there are 980 available export fields for use. If you want to customize your export, I recommend giving it a new name. And saving it as a new item. That way the default is always available if you want to revert to it. You can choose to view the available export fields either under Group View or Sort View. Sort View allows you to sort column headings in case you're looking for something that you already know the name of and you want to jump to it alphabetically. You can also choose to group items into their respective categories. For example, we can view information about individuals here. Now, most of these codes are going to look fairly confusing. However, if you click on them, you can see on the right-hand side there's a description of what this field is. You can also choose to sort your selection into the items that have already been included in your export or have not been included in your export yet. And this is done with the thumbs up and thumbs down arrow at the top. By choosing thumbs up, you'll only view fields that are already included. So for example, we can see the address information that we'll be including in our current export. By choosing thumbs down, we select only fields that are not included. This includes any of the premium fields and the voter history fields. And we can choose to include one of these by simply expanding the field and placing a checkbox next to it. And that moves it into our selected fields. You can also select an entire category by placing a checkbox next to the filter. We now have all of the household information in our selection. Once you're comfortable with your selection, you can go ahead and save again and close this window. As you can see, we have our export customization as our chosen field template now. Note that just like the saved queries, on this page, the list filter defaults to the last 7 days. You can choose to include all time to see all of the lists that you've ever purchased. You can also archive lists that are either obsolete or have been superseded by another list. And if you do need to pull those back again, you can choose to show archived files. And after doing either of these operations, you do need to use the refresh button here to bring everything back. Note that you can set the default for your export-output format. And finally, to purchase the list, you can use either the icon or the checkbox and the purchase item. If you're on a contract, you'll be able to skip this step, but if not, you'll be prompted to enter your credit card information onto this page. I'm not going to purchase this list at this time, but we can take a look at the dashboard information for this list. This lets you do some final recaps on the information on that list. The dashboard is for building out visual demonstrations. You can choose from all of your loaded lists at the top. Now I only have one, so this is the only one available. You can see a total count for each of the criteria, the selection types here. And on the right-hand side, you can choose a field to build different graphs up. As you can see, this gives you some very nice visual graphs that you can use when reviewing your data. You can also choose to look at different fields for other areas, for example, individuals. And these are the counts based on the selection type that we could have chosen during the query builder. Finally, one last item to note about the query builder. If you find yourself running the same query often in different areas, or you have a basic structure that you like to use, you can actually set a default query under Query Manager. And this can be quite helpful if you have a demographic that you're constantly targeting, for example. And it's done using the green checkbox. Finally, the last tab at the top allows you to edit your account information. This will allow you to see a purchase report of all of the sheets that you have ever purchased. You can also change your registration information if you need to. In some cases, support may need to contact you about a particular list or about a particular feature, or you may contact us and we need to get back to you, so it's important to keep your contact information up to date on this page. That concludes our Voter Lists Online webinar for today. I hope it's been informative, and I hope you'll join us again in the future for other webinars.